Welcome to Spirit Music Meetups. Mike Burris here, and we're on blog topic 2 of identity page. So who do you see? Who do you see yourself to be, based on blog topic 1 in the introduction? Now that we know the different parts of man, what your identity is, who do you see yourself to be? Some revelations about my identity may help. So I've gone through this process of growing to understand what my calling is, what my identity is, and that's what we'll go over now. That might help you with your search and trying to understand what your calling is. But we know from my previous videos, we always just jump into the fray here. We jump into the river and let the river take us wherever it's going to go, and that's the Holy Spirit, the river of life. I do that musically. Well, that was good. I'm going to do that non-stop one of these days. Says, so I have this question. Who we see ourselves to be, our identity really matters. Oh, I guess that wasn't a question. Exclamation mark. That's right. Who we see ourselves to be, our identity really matters. As a Christian musician, we will be kept from playing anointed, prophetic, and even spontaneous music. That's the 3 main points of this whole website. If we see ourselves as only a music student or professional musician. And I've had both of those. So I know you can't go down one path until you have the identity to take you down that path. The world is full of these people, right? And so we will act out of that worldly identity, conformed to the pattern of this world, as Romans chapter 12, verse 2 talks about. Acting very much as they act, right? Very much as they act. And even, I should say, as I did in the previous, even if we say we are now doing this for God in His service. So I met a lot of Christian musicians that are very much in this mindset. And I tell you, I was in that mindset, so I know where they're coming from. I'm now doing this for God in His service, which is very much like the Old Covenant, really. Zechariah 4:6. Some of the most worldly, I have to say this, some of the most worldly music rehearsals I've had were actually with Christians trying to get ready for Sunday service. You know, I've been in 37 bands, 15 music ministries, 22 secular bands, and more musicians than that, individual musicians. So I kind of speak from experience here. So many, in these rehearsals with Christians, so many bruised egos, control issues, bickering over notes and music structure or the form, navigation, how to get through the song, how many times we do this, that, and an intense pressure to get ready in time. One of the things I noticed is that professionals, obviously, they're going to rehearse on their own. They're going to come prepared to the rehearsals, the band rehearsals. Really don't see that very much when it comes to Christians, even if they are really good. For some reason, they let it all hang out. And not one of the 15 worship teams started out, this is really upsetting, with conversational prayer. That's where you're actually hearing from God. Prosuke, that is the dominant form of prayer in the New Testament. It's prophetic. And in 15 music ministries, right, I didn't have one that did that. Or did they start out in adoring worship. I never saw that happen once. Actually going into worship before they actually rehearsed. Most only threw in a 1-minute help us do this desus supplication prayer. That's a type of prayer where we tell God what we need, right? As a formality. It seemed like it was a formality. Like, oh, we just have to get this out of the way, 1 minute, and then rush off into our band rehearsal. It was very disconcerting. And one, right, didn't do anything but launch right into getting down to business, right, of rehearsing. So that's really sad. I couldn't believe that. I even said something to the worship leader, and he didn't change. The next rehearsal was the same way. It didn't even faze him. I think he was in it just for the money. It was a gig. He was playing at the University of Arizona. He was going there to get his doctorate. And this church gig was just a gig. It was just a way for him to make money. He didn't want to put any extra effort into it. And he just wanted to get through it. So I played for some churches that were so busy getting ready that they even started the worship service itself, right, without any kind of prayer. Unbelievable, isn't that something? And what a disaster these sessions and services turned out to be. I just shake my head. I played in so many bands, and I just walk away thinking, man, these people have no clue. They're just all over the place. They have no clue. I didn't want to say anything. I talked to one brother about it. We prayed about it, but it was like, wow. They're just like, the devil loves for us to put our trusting, relying faith in our own flesh's might and power, right? The Zechariah 4:6, right? They just love to have us do this. The devil just loves it, So, it's so they just love. The devil loves religion. It loves religion, and that's Zechariah 4:6. All too many times, I have also got swept up by this fleshly approach to music. Yeah, I was a professional, like I said. I go to all these different churches, and I've been swept up. Even though for years I've had many supernatural experiences, directly spoken prophetic rhema words, dreams, and visions about music, I have too often seen myself primarily as a professional musician and teacher, albeit a Christian one. I think a lot of Christian musicians struggle with their identity. So I was bringing to the table the same approach that a lot of these other Christians were. So I'm not beating them up. I'm saying this is where we're at. Here's some of the things God said to me to gradually lead me to accepting who He made me to be. I'm still fighting against this because there's the flesh, right? My identity, which is, here it is. This is what He told me. I am an anointed musician. He told me this very clearly on the way to work one day. Blew me away. Not just a professional teacher and drummer. He told me that a week earlier. And then he said, who has played by the Spirit, is playing by the Spirit, and will play by the Spirit, even joining others I have called to play in my courtyards. Now that was something he told me a long time ago, but he reminded me on this occasion. He says, remember I told you this. Long ago I had a vision of a butterfly of light that flew into my childhood home's carport, right, into my carport, that flitted from drum to drum immediately before my hand was compelled to play on that surface. And I drummed like a wild man in a trance. Another time, while in the zone playing rudiments on my practice pad in the bathroom, the Lord told me that He was preparing musicians like myself for His courtyards in heaven. It blew me away. What do you say to that? And so, like I said, He reminded me of that occasion. That was way back. I remember I just watched a movie called The Fisher King, so I don't know what. It was way back. I just wept. I just sat there and couldn't believe he said that to me. Once I had done a massive study on how skill and professionalism wasn't really needed, right? It wasn't really needed. So go to that page, skill and professionalism. Wasn't really needed. but that the Spirit of God was. And I had posted it on my drumming website. So I had a different website. When I went back to just read it in order to further edit it, I got, again, filled by the Spirit. So, I mean, that was a confirmation. The Holy Spirit was saying, you got it, buddy. You got that right. Then there was this time I was in the backyard just feeling grateful for all the music experiences I've had growing up and in my career. Then I noticed a bunch of birds on my 3 power cable lines across my backyard, right? And from the angle I was sitting, they formed a perfect slanted staff of music. And the birds were forming a rhythm I immediately recognized as shaving a haircut. Dun, 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 right? Dun, dun. So I had to laugh. I just started laughing because I was like, that's dun, 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 dun. Then I noticed that the lines in the rhythmic tune were leading right to my drum room. That's where the power cables go. They go right to my room. And when I got this revelation, I got massively filled by the Spirit with tears of joy. So, I mean, the Lord keeps giving me hints as to what my identity is. I remember a dream where I saw people from another country playing on hand drums, and without knowing their language, I joined in, and we were all massively filled by the Spirit. That was really awesome. That was a dream. And I felt right at home with them, like we were family. And we were. I remember having a dream where I was on stage at a large festival, sharing our faith, trusting, relying faith, and music, but afterwards just walking through the Woodstock-like camps in the large parking lots, keeping our hands warm over steel drums with fires burning in them. So he probably called me to some big things that I just never followed through on. You know, I just went, oh, it's just a dream. I can't forget how many dreams I've had about other musicians I know, especially Carl Cherry and John Bujak. They live here in Tucson, Arizona, where God had spoken to me about his divine plans for them. And I've texted them and I told them about it. I can't forget how many times I've played full of the Spirit in 15 churches, but using absolutely no music to guide me, right? Just going with the Spirit, right? And yet how many times people commented how the drums were doing powerful things to them, in many cases at the objection of band leaders who were in the flesh and felt thrown off, they said, or threatened that people were not complimenting them as they were me. So I had this one guy, he was like really jealous. You could tell he was definitely threatened. Well, there's so many more amazing things God has shown me, and I'm looking forward to many more. If you have trusting, relying faith to seek the Lord for them, he will gladly give them to you also. And so I pray like almost every night when I go to bed, I say, Lord, please speak to me. I'm all ears, I'm all eyes. You got 8 hours, I hope, of undivided attention. I always told musicians and church members that I was just going with the flow. I was just going with the flow. Just like I started out, right? Just go with the flow. I've even been lectured by some church musicians that, quote, I should have music in front of me and that I should be more professional and take it more seriously. I actually was told this, unbelievable, by a bass player. I just kept my mouth shut, but laughed my head off afterwards. They were clueless that I make my living teaching and playing, and these people were amateurs lecturing me. Yep. I played in front of 1,000 people audiences night after night in 200 person symphony orchestras, and for Vegas quality Elvis Presley impersonations. After 37 bands, I've been around the block of might and power flesh several times over. Flesh makes a living, but it can't not be compared to playing by the Spirit, just as God desires from Zechariah 4:6 and John 4:23. And, I have to add that I make my living teaching and playing, and I have literally accordion files. accordion files of charts, music charts that I have made and use in many gigs, right? Many secular gigs. So in the secular gigs, they are really about following the music exactly, as everybody else has, right? So, and that's what you're paid for. And we make a lot of changes to those charts in our rehearsals. So it's imperative that we have those charts, or that we memorize those charts. So, these people were lecturing me. See, I just go with the flow. When it comes to playing in church, I didn't always used to do this. I used to follow the charts, but then the Lord, woke me up. I once saw a teen drummer barely playing chord progressions on a guitar. He's the drummer, right, of the band, but he's playing guitar. I said, whoa, that's strange. And he's leading worship in a way I've rarely seen, incredibly free-form and beautiful. My guitarist, Herb, and I had to grab the pew in front of us to keep from falling over. The wind of God was pushing us back. I've never experienced this. Afterwards, I asked the teenager how they were doing this. He said, like so many Christian bands, they tried practicing for hours, and most of the time it just dissolved into stressful, bitter flesh. Stressful, bitter flesh. Just like my experiences. Now they don't practice at all, but instead they do this prosupamai conversational praying, right? It's really listening to God, and worship the Lord for about a half an hour or so before they even pick up an instrument. And then they stay in that zone when they do. Their music just happens with no set list, no conductor, and no schedule, directed completely by the Holy Spirit. This is the meaning of surrendering control, right? That's what it means. And I was absolutely captivated. Absolutely. What spoiled the whole evening, I went up to him afterwards and just asked more questions. What spoiled the whole evening was when the very controlling pastor thought I was a competitor, because I would regularly contact his church and many other churches about big community drum percussion music circles I would do for Tucson's community. One group of 25 called Krakatoa played for 4 years in town. So I was very involved musically in town. He escorted me and my friend and verbally out of his church and verbally abused us literally for 15 minutes, warning us that if we ever came back, he would kick us out again from his church. I think Herb and I counted my church 7 times. We both agreed the guy was demon-possessed and very self-serving. Ironically, he had a big sign on the side of his church, saying, "Experience God's love here." Now that was fake news. Neither of us ever did go back, but the teens' conversation planted a seed in my spirit that has grown into this website. The Holy Spirit works around self-serving pastors who want to control him. The Lord told me this in a dream. He's not going to be controlled by them. A lot of churchmen want to control him. He says, I won't be controlled. Furthermore, the incident taught me a profound lesson that demons are actually running churches, even if the pastors are using things of the Spirit for their own purposes to become important, big, and rich. I also noticed that most pastors like him just get physically fatter and fatter during their stay. Maybe it's stress eating. An observation here. I wrote 2 letters to the pastor. The first he ignored, and a year later I sent another to clear the air and look for reconciliation, because the Lord talks a lot about reconciling and with your brother, and come to your brother and bring 2 or 3 witnesses, And so in his short card, he refused to take any responsibility for his actions, acted like nothing ever happened, even though I had detailed it in the letter. and said that I was welcome to come back to his church. Again, he said his church anytime. Are you kidding? My wife and I just laughed and laughed. There is nothing new about this. The new believer, Simon the magician, tried to bribe the apostles for the power to lay hands on people to get the Holy Spirit. See, it was visible, right? To get the visible Holy Spirit. In the book of Acts concerning early church history, Paul and Silas were being followed by a slave girl who had a spirit of divination, right? She could see the future, that made her owners rich by her fortune telling. She would cry out to the crowds for many days what their intentions were, like, right? Beating them to the punchline of their gospel logos message of the truth. Paul became greatly annoyed and drove the demon out. Good for him, which infuriated the owners. Paul said that some actually preach Christ from envy and rivalry. Some men are false prophets, false apostles, deceitful workmen, disguising themselves. On Judgment Day, Jesus said, many will say to him, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name or authority, and cast out demons in your name and authority, and do many mighty works in your name and authority? And then I will declare to them, I never actually, experientially, relationally, gnosko, knew you. Depart from me. And I think that's what we're going to see. Now, back to your identity. You are not what you do. Despite all the sayings that Plato, like Plato's, right? This one, the measure of a man is what he does. That's what they say Plato said. That is actually taken out of context because the quote adds with power. The measure of a man is what he does with power. So it's not what he does, but it's what he does with power. So more fake news. See, people love to take things out of context, quote half of the sentence, right? The Lord also had to show me that doing jobs isn't what is important to him. Doing jobs. So you want to see my link, my story. My story will tell you this long saga of doing jobs. I agree with David Sentisban that prophetic music doesn't just flow through your fingers or your voice, but resonates deep within your soul as an expression of who you are and what you really believe, right? And so it will be with you. It behooves you to press into God's presence until he tells you who you really are. Throughout much of my childhood, even though I could feel intense joy and success in my drumming through so many bands from the time I was in 7th grade, I didn't know it was God's joy and success, but claimed it for myself. I think this is right. This may be your situation also. You may have done the same. I received little to no support from family, friends, or peers because the general opinion in the 1970s was that most musicians were drug addicts, and poor losers. Of course, when I had to decide what career to pursue in college, I didn't even consider music. Man, I was listening to everybody else's opinions but God's. But back then, I wasn't even a Christian. So what do you expect? All I knew was the natural influences of self-seeking ambition with its emphasis on self-importance, success, and money. I'm sure I was also being influenced by demons that I didn't even know anything about. I was easy prey. Although I got a music minor during my 2-year degree, my first 2-year, it's my 2-year degree before my master, yeah. I didn't, I did it primarily to get a music scholarship to pay for the rest of my schooling to get my 4-year degree. So, you know, it was all about what I had to do, right? Money. Thank God that the Lord drew me to himself and got me back on course. He can do the same for you. So my reflection is, as Christian musicians, have you spent enough time with the Lord asking, seeking, and knocking as to who the Lord has made you to be, so that you can operate out of this identity instead of your flesh? So if you don't find out, you'll end up probably operating out of the flesh. Out of the flesh. There's just so much influence of this world, right, on you. So that's the end of that blog, and I look forward to your comments below, your experiences, so that we are encouraged and learn together. It says 1 Corinthians 14, 29 or something like that to 31, 40, 29, 30, 31, somewhere in there. That's body ministry, and that's what happens right now when you put your comments on the bottom. Now we can have a conversation. Now we can do body ministry. So right now I just start the conversation, and you guys continue. God bless you. Bye-bye.